You are listening to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show, and I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Jeremy Nagel. Jeremy is a neurodivergent software developer turned startup founder. He sold his startup company, Smooth Messenger, to MessageMedia in 2022 and now works at MessageMedia as a product manager. His new startup, Focus Bear, is a productivity and work-life balance app for people with ADHD. Today we're talking about blocking distractions using AI. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Wonderful to be here, Richard.
Really great to have you here. Now, I always like to ask my guests, where in the world are you, Jeremy?
I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
Fantastic. Now, before we get into this, full disclosure, I also have ADHD. So this is going to be a little bit of a personal podcast for me. So I will try not to interject myself too much into it. But I think I already just did. But anyway, why don't we start off, Jeremy, just so people understand. Can you give a little explanation on what ADHD is and some of the misconceptions that people have about it?
Yeah, sure. I like to think of it because there's the traditional approach which talks about the deficit, that it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So deficit and disorder, very negative ways of looking at it. But there's another way of looking at ADHD, which is vast variable attention stimulus trait, which talks more about how people with ADHD or VAST, they tend to be very creative and they have lots of ideas floating around. For me personally, that's part of what has made me successful as an entrepreneur, that I've had lots of ideas and I'm also able to really fixate on things that interest me. So there's this perhaps a misconception that ADHD means that you can't concentrate at all, which isn't true.
It's absolutely the opposite in some cases.
Yeah, you can get into hyperfocus on things that you care about, and that can be really powerful. That's been what has made me effective as a software developer in the past and what has allowed me to go deep on the businesses that I've built. So if we can channel it correctly, it works really well. But I think it's not the right type of brain that if you want to be say an accountant and you're doing really boring work all day, it's going to be terrible. But if you're doing something that you care about, that resonates with you and that you're skilled at, I think ADHD can be a superpower.
And that's one of the classic statements about ADHD. I mean, just to give some additional context, Psychology Today, they actually found that people with ADHD were 300% more likely to start their own business than a neurotypical person. And there's some great international examples of people who have been incredibly successful that have ADHD. Richard Branson, which is somebody that most people know, John Chambers, the CEO of Cisco Systems, and Ingvar Kamprad, the Swedish founder and chairman of IKEA, just to name but a few. And the list literally goes on. You know, Scott Kelly, the astronaut, will.i.am, Johnny Depp. So to see it as a challenge can just be a challenge. So tell us a little bit about how you have channeled ADHD into your life.
Sure. Well, I only got diagnosed recently, so it's something that I have channeled unconsciously for many years. I got diagnosed last year, and if I look back at my life, it's pretty clear that my predilection for having multiple jobs and multiple businesses may be linked to my ADHD. So from the time that I graduated, I never had a single job. I typically had a day job, and then I'd have multiple side hustles that I had going. And that at the beginning of my career, that felt like, why am I doing this? Why can't I just stick to one job? And I beat myself up a lot around it. And now I look back at it and see it was amazing because it meant that I had different ideas that I could test out. And some of them I got bored with quickly. Others, I got some traction around them, especially with my last business, Smooth Messenger. That was something that I was doing as a side hustle, and it started to grow into something a lot bigger. And I think that freedom to be able to experiment with multiple things, some people would look at it and say, Jeremy is he's not loyal, he can't do one thing at a time. And maybe there's some truth to that, but it has actually worked out all right for me. That advice around you just have to focus on one thing and do it really well, I think it works for neurotypical people. But for ADHD folks like me, I can actually juggle multiple things. I can't do it on my own. I need to have a team around me. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that I can keep going with all these ideas as long as I've got people to help.
Yeah, there's actually a great documentary, I think it's out of Canada, called ADHD and Loving It, where it actually demonstrates that if you have people in the background that can do, say, some of the more traditional tasks, say, you've got an accountant as a great example, and you let people with ADHD concentrate on what they're good at, which is really focusing and being creative, then the results can be absolutely amazing at times. So tell us about Focus Bear. Tell us about AI and how you're using it.
Sure. So there's two ways that I'm using AI, and I think what we were just talking about is a good segue to the first way, which I think many people are doing now, where we're using ChatGPT and many of their generative AI services as an adjunct to our brain, because I find it really helpful, especially with my ADHD brain, that I can be working on something, and for example, if I'm writing some code, often in the past I would get stuck and then I would go on Google and I would then get distracted because I'd be searching for how do I use a certain view in React Native when I'm making a mobile app. And I'd go onto Stack Overflow, which is a programming site, and then it would have this part on the sidebar where it has interesting network questions. And suddenly I would find myself reading a question about how can I build a world around goblins on Mars, because there's completely unrelated things on that site which aren't relevant to programming. Whereas with ChatGPT, I get the same kind of information, but I don't have the distractions, because it's just, it's me talking to the bot and I get the ideas back. And it works really well, I think, for many people, both being able to communicate in natural language, but also just not having the distractions. So that's the first way. Oh, you go.
No, and that's one of the interesting things. I mean, in the world of ADHD, there's the whole concept of squirrel. You're talking away and suddenly you see a squirrel out of the corner of your eye, and suddenly that becomes the most interesting thing. So I can absolutely see what you're saying and the validity of it, because when people with ADHD are focused, there is just an unstoppable force there, and you can just get so much done and produce absolutely amazing results. So that is a wonderful way of using the technology.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been really helpful from that perspective. And I think that use case is quite obvious to most people who've tried ChatGPT, that you immediately start getting results. And there's Bard and there's the other options as well. I think it works pretty well for most use cases. And then the other way that I'm using AI is in relation to the app that I've been building, Focus Bear. To give some background around the app, the idea is to manage distractions. So we've talked about how ChatGPT can help with that. But there's other situations where in the past that I would start researching a particular task, or I would be in my emails and I would be going down rabbit holes that I didn't really need to be going down. And part of it is sometimes we can use tools like ChatGPT that will constrain distractions. But the other side of it is often I do need to go to different websites, and the key thing for me is making sure that the website is actually relevant, because I can see, for example, a notification on my phone or on my computer, and it looks really alluring in the moment, and I might go and tap on that notification, and then I lose 20 minutes looking at apps that aren't actually relevant. So I wanted a way to be able to almost catch myself before I would go down that rabbit hole. And that's what Focus Bear does, that if I go to a website, it'll then pop up a little screen saying, are you sure you need to go to this site right now? You said that you were focused on writing a report. And then it uses AI, the Open AI API, to determine whether that website is relevant or not. And it can tell. So if I go to a website in relation to writing a report, and it's something like top 10 tips for writing reports, then it will say, tick, that is relevant. But if I go to top 10 dog videos, it's going to block it because that's not relevant. And by using OpenAI to do this, it's actually really helpful, because in the past I had to go in and make a list of everything that was blocked. So I had, say, BBC, ABC News, all the news websites are pretty bad for me. I tend to, if I'll start reading the headlines and then I'll lose half an hour. But then there's a lot more websites than that, and it's very hard to come up with a comprehensive list. By using AI, it's able to evaluate each website and determine whether it is relevant for what I'm working on at that time.
And you can set a specific time period that this will run for within your app, or is it just a task-based? I mean, how does it work exactly?
Yeah, so you can use Pomodoro mode, which is an Italian term for tomato. And the background for that is there was this guy who had a kitchen timer in the shape of a tomato, Pomodoro in Italian, and he would do 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest. And that's a feature as part of the app that you can be concentrating on your report for 25 minutes, and it will be managing distractions for you during that time. And then in the 5-minute break, you can go back and do whatever you want. I think it's better if you don't go and surf Facebook or anything like that. Better if you go for a walk or do something low dopamine.
Yes. And this is the thing, again, just back to the technical side of ADHD, it is that need for dopamine. Everybody's a dopamine addict and everybody's brain needs it. The ADHD brain isn't getting the right amount. So it will find dopamine from any direction it can. And if there is Facebook, if there is, some distraction somewhere else, subconsciously, the brain will try and grab hold of that. And if you can stop that and work with how the brain works and keep people focused, extremely successful. So absolutely can see how that would work. Now, of course, this wouldn't just work for people with ADHD, because there are times when anybody, be they neurodivergent, ADHD, or with anything else going on, they just have to get a job done. And there are too many distractions in this world. So this sounds like it could be an extremely effective tool for everybody, regardless of whether they have ADHD or not.
Yeah, I think people with ADHD are almost canaries in the coal mine of the attentional world that we're in, where we've got lots of behavioral scientists at Facebook and Instagram and large tech companies like that who are coming up with ways to try and monopolize our eyeballs. And if we want to take our attention back, then it's a combination of potentially using a tool like Focus Bear, but also looking at practices that can help us to focus better. So the other part of the app is doing a morning routine. I find that days where I meditate and I do aerobic exercise in the morning, I'm much better able to concentrate for the rest of the day. And that's another feature of the Focus Bear app, that we have a habit guide feature where in the morning, your computer and your phone will tell you, first of all, for me, it's go for a run. And that makes a huge difference to my ability to concentrate. And then after that, do some journaling, do some deep breathing. Everyone will have a different morning routine, but I think it's generally pretty useful for everyone, and in particular, people with ADHD, to do some exercise, do some contemplation practice, and do some planning for the day before you get right into it.
So through a variety of techniques, you've created the right amount of dopamine in your brain, so your brain isn't scanning all over the place to try and find something, and that helps you focus. And again, that can work for anybody at all. I mean, sometimes people come out with the phrase, oh, I'm a little bit ADHD, which can be quite offensive at times because you don't know the struggle of actually having ADHD and the challenges that have gone with it. But everybody on occasion, they need to focus and they need help.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay, and when did you realize that AI could actually do this for you? I mean, what was the story of how this happened?
I had been using AI even before ChatGPT came out, and because there were examples where in my last business, I wanted to have a feature where, a bit like in Gmail, you can start typing and it will suggest the next few words in the sentence. And that came out probably 3 years ago. I wanted to do something similar around that for SMS messages, because my last business was in relation to sending SMSs on behalf of businesses. And I wanted to have a suggested reply feature. And we kind of had it working, and I'd done a few things like that. And then when I saw the power of GPT 3.5 and saw how much better the content was, it really unlocked a lot of possibilities for me. We're doing other things with GPT as well, where we've got a custom motivational message each day, where you put in your long-term goals, and then each day you'll get Focus Bear giving you a rousing motivational message, something like, you can do it. You've been sticking to your morning routine for the last 3 days. You're on track. For me, it's being able to run a 5K race in under 18 minutes. And it'll be a slight variation on that theme. And then we've also got different tones. So I can choose from pirate mode, cheerleader mode, sarcastic mode. And I love that it's able to do it in a slightly different way each time. It makes it a bit more fun for me.
And that is also one of the important factors here. Again, not just for ADHD people, everybody out there. If something is the same time and time again, it's going to get boring and you'll stop using it. So making it fun and interesting is a really smart thing for you to be doing.
Yeah, for sure.
So this does sound like there is certain parallels with body doubling, which is another technique for handling ADHD, which is you have somebody there working with you. So it sounds like you're almost creating an AI system which duplicates at least certain parts of the body doubling approach. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that is quite a fair statement. For example, I have a personal trainer that I train with once per week, and I wanted to be able to have similar benefits from working with him, which is expensive, and I can't really afford to do it every day.
No.
So I've basically set up Focus Bear where it guides me through my workout each morning, and it is better when I do it with my PT, but on the other days, it's still pretty good. It guides me through doing various, each day it'll be slightly different. I'll do chest one day, legs another day, that sort of thing. And having it in the app where it also embeds a YouTube video. So it will have that effect of being able to follow someone else. I find, especially in the morning when I'm not always charging on all cylinders right away, having someone else to copy makes it way easier. And you can do that just going onto YouTube and finding a follow along workout. But I found that YouTube is a little bit distracting, and I might
designed to be, of course.
Yeah. And if you just go to YouTube, you might get distracted by videos of tanks or anything else that the algorithm is feeding you, rather than doing the workout or the meditation video that you intended to do.
And before you know it, you've lost hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have certainly been there, as I think many listeners today will have been. And that's one of the things that I was very happy to be doing this particular podcast. People may not realize they've got ADHD. Like yourself, I was diagnosed quite late in life. And to look back and go, oh my goodness, once you understand what the symptoms are that go with it. So this is a very positive piece of software that you've written. So it's a great app that, again, can help everybody. And whether somebody identifies as having ADHD or not, it actually could help people, and they may have ADHD, and it could lead them on a journey to go a little further with it potentially. So this is a great example of how AI can help people. How do you see AI helping society in general? Because to me, it does sound like you're taking away some of the negative challenges that people have. You're taking away maybe the repetitive side of things, which is a classic way of using AI. How do you see AI and society interacting?
I love the idea of AI sidekicks for everyone, because even if you don't have ADHD, there's probably some parts of work that might be challenging for you, and it's going to be a bit different for each person. And that there was a movement in the past of encouraging everyone to have virtual assistants, which could be good, but is also very expensive and in some ways a little bit demeaning as well, in terms of having to have people do the menial work while you get to do the fun work. But now we can all afford to have someone or a little being out there to help us. And as AI improves, we're going to be able to delegate more and more tasks. And I think it's going to mean that we might head towards a state where everyone can do work that they enjoy doing, that the BS jobs, the mundane work that has really epitomized corporate life in the past, that may be a thing of the past, that those type of jobs will become irrelevant. And there might be concern about that meaning mass unemployment, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think what we've seen with every major innovation is that even though it displaces some jobs, it will create new jobs. And it's going to mean that as a society, we might eventually move towards that utopia where our basic needs are taken care of, that we can get food and shelter without having to really worry about it, and we can move towards self-actualization and being able to do things that really are meaningful for us and are not dull and time-consuming.
And I think that's a really important message, in that so many people are already freaking out and going, oh, AI is going to take all of our jobs. And that is just not the case. If people embrace AI, I like to say that there's a wonderful democratizing effect of AI, democratizing potential, to give everybody a level playing field, regardless of how much money they've got, what their background is, where they come from in the world. So I can see it as a wonderful thing. And what you're doing already with this technology is a step towards that.
Yep. And to be clear, I'm not saying that Focus Bear can cure ADHD or anything like that.
But nothing can cure ADHD. That's the point.
Yeah. And even it's not a treatment on its own. I still would encourage people to work with the doctor, and I work with an ADHD coach, and it's all part of a complete picture that trying to work on it from as many angles as possible, and it can really help. And I think that's the same with AI, that it's not necessarily a panacea, but it can be part of a solution for many of the problems that we're facing.
I think that's great advice. Just getting a coach on anything is always a good thing to do, regardless of who you are. So, staying in the advice realm, what's that one piece of advice you wish you'd had that would have helped you, that you'd like to pass on to the listeners today for them to take on board?
The biggest piece of advice is use flashcards. And I do wonder whether this advice will become dated with AI, but I don't think it will. The reasoning behind this is that I did quite a lot of education. I went to uni. I did environmental science at university. I did honors. I did very well in my university and my high school, yet I retained very little of it. If you ask me to tell you about climatology or some of the advanced biochemistry subjects that I did, I couldn't really tell you beyond vague details, because I didn't really make efforts to come up with ways to retain that information. And it's something that I've learned about later, that by using an app called Anki and similar apps like that, which are around knowledge retention, where everything that I learn, and I put things about AI in there, I put it into my Anki database, and then every day I spend 10 minutes going through those cards. And it means that I've now been able to retain everything that I've learned in the last probably 5 years since I've been using it. And it's such a difference, because I think in the past, long-term memory felt like a bit of a happy accident, that if I was able to remember something, it wasn't really that common for me. Whereas now it's really a choice, that if I want to retain something long-term, I put it into my Anki deck and I will remember it. And I don't think enough people are aware of the power of spaced repetition. And it's a very cheap thing to do. The app doesn't cost any money. It's just the time involved. So I'm learning Chinese, and I'm retaining my Chinese vocab by using Anki. I'd really encourage it to anyone who wants to learn things and wants to make sure that they still remember them and in 10 years' time.
Fantastic. So, Jeremy, where can people find you, and where is the big project that you want them all to look at right now?
People can find me on focusbear.io, which is where you can find information about the Focus Bear app, and my contact details are on the website as well.
Fantastic. Well, Jeremy, great chat today. I say that one was quite personal for me, so thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage show. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI advantage today.